Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
I think I really struggled with happiness, and it was strange because in a way I had everything I wanted. I had successfully moved my family in a way that they could be close to, or we could be close to my in-laws. My wife could be close to her parents. Her dad started doing much better, but I felt isolated, and frankly the best word that captures how I felt lonely.
Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
Today we are speaking with Mohit Mukherjee.
My first job out of college was a fairly traditional business job. That wasn't necessarily my path.
Founding director of the UPeace Center for Executive Education, established by the United Nations. Author of a handbook for social entrepreneurs and has a TEDx talk. How does social impact drive our happiness?
You know, the idea of happiness.
What are your top 3 tips for teens to create social impact?
My answer probably has evolved over time. Look at the gaps, like what are some needs that are not being met?
What would you say, though, as a leader, has been one of your greatest learnings?
What I used to think about leadership is leaders, have a vision for something and then they make it happen. I found myself quite exhausted.
Welcome to Hack Your Happiness. Welcome, Mohit.
Thank you so much. Yeah, excited to be on this podcast.
Yes, thank you. We are just so excited to be speaking with you and to have you on Hack Your Happiness today. You are an experienced author, leader, and social entrepreneur. So tell us, what led you to take an interest in social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so, I think I had, my first job out of college was a fairly traditional business job. It was a corporate job in San Francisco. And after doing that for 3 years, I felt like that wasn't necessarily my path.
If our episodes help you hack your happiness and find a small bit of happiness in every day, be sure to share this episode with a teen in your life or anyone in your life who could use a small bit of happiness, as well as shop our happiness wellness products to bring a small bit of happiness to your home, linked in the description.
What I had learned in those 3 years is, hey, this is how businesses function. And there was a lot about it that I appreciated and liked, right? And so when I left the corporate world, I moved into the field of education. And there I was initially a public school, not a public school teacher, but a teacher in a classroom. And so very much in the box of, let's say, curriculum, and hard to innovate in basically the world of K-12 education. It was my experience. And then my third job was in a nonprofit organization. And this organization was funded entirely through what I call contributed income. We had no revenues that the organization earned. So we had individual donations, we had some foundations that supported us. And I felt like there was a bit of a disconnect between the work we did and how we got paid, which was kind of the opposite of my experience in the corporate sector, right? But here in the nonprofit, what I felt was really exciting to me is the mission of the organization. I felt I was doing work that was meaningful, but then from a business model point of view, or how we made money, I was like, this doesn't work for me. Like, we're totally dependent on these individuals and these grants that have nothing to do with how we work. So to me, I wanted to continue to do work that felt really impactful and meaningful to me, but with the idea of, hey, how can we have more of a control over our own destiny, which translated to how can we do good, meaningful work that also earns money while doing it. And so it was kind of a natural progression of these 3 different job experiences that led me to starting something that I felt was a social enterprise. It was mission aligned and it had a business model around it. And I've been doing that for the last 19 years. So obviously something resonated with me, yeah.
I love that. I think it's so amazing when you find your passion. I think it's really interesting how you also experimented so much. I think a lot of times teens are worried about experimenting. I know sometimes it's difficult because you'll be like, yeah, well, I don't know if I should try this because, what if I don't like it? What if I don't work well in it? But like, it's important because
Yeah.
you learn important parts about yourself, and then you're able to do better in the future, and you built something that you just love and has all those aspects.
And what I think is really cool is how you, like Amnesty just sort of mentioned, combined all these different interests. Like you combine your interest with business with your interest of creating positive social impacts. And I just think that that is so important. And as teenagers, like realizing that, I think sometimes we look into the future and, we see these traditional business pathways, or, maybe becoming a lawyer or a doctor or whatever might be like the traditional idyllic, right, business route of career. And so I really love how you were not afraid to quit and, take what you loved and build it all into one true career that now you've been doing for many, many years and really feel passionate in. I think that's such a good reminder that, like, there's so many different possibilities in the world. So don't be afraid to, try things out and follow what you love.
100%.
Absolutely. I just want to encourage everyone listening to this to think about that idea of experimenting, right? And because part of an experiment is there is no bad result in an experiment. So if you don't get the outcome you hope and expect, well, you learned something, and so then you get to experiment again. And if you get an outcome that felt positive, then great, you can do more of those kinds of experiments. So frankly, even though I said, hey, I've done the same thing now for 19 years. Actually, within the organization that I started, we've been constantly experimenting and changing what we do, how we do it, the team. And then personally, I've taken at 2 different periods kind of like a sabbatical, a break. I do other things on the side. So yeah, the experimentation continues, but at least now it's within a particular area. Yeah.
Yeah, things are always constantly changing. And throughout your journey, you have changed so much. You've gone through so many different directions. What do you think your greatest challenge was, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I think interestingly, the greatest challenge I've had really connects to the name of your podcast. I think for me, at one point, so the organization that I started was based in Costa Rica, and that's where I was with my wife at the time. And then we had 2 little kids, so then it became interesting. I was like, oh wow, I'm juggling a lot. And then so my kids were young. The organization was young too, like 6 years old. And then there was my in-laws who are based in Florida. My father-in-law was not doing well health-wise, and so we decided actually to relocate to Florida. And in my mind, that was going to be a great solution, so that it allowed my wife and our kids to be close to her parents. And I figured, hey, since I had a small team in Costa Rica, Florida to Costa Rica is a short flight, I'm like, oh, I can make it all work. But actually, it really was tough on me. So I was working, when I was in Florida, I was working from home. So I was quite disconnected from any kind of professional community. I wasn't really meeting anybody. I was kind of working on the stuff I was passionate about, but I was working in a very isolated way, quite different from previous days when I would go into the university. I would have, colleagues, I would have students around me. It was a very rich, and still is a very rich community in Costa Rica, where the Center for Executive Education that I started exists. And then when I was traveling to Costa Rica to run some workshops, I was connected socially because now I'm around, old friends and colleagues, but I was away from my kids and my wife. And so I was feeling like, oh, wow, I'm now not feeling like I'm being, present as a dad, as a husband. So I think I really struggled with kind of this idea of happiness, and it was strange because in a way I had everything I wanted. I had successfully moved my family in a way that they could be close to, or we could be close to my in-laws, my wife could be close to her parents, her dad started doing much better, but I felt isolated, and frankly, the best word that captures how I felt lonely professionally because I was working alone, and I felt lonely socially because I wasn't really in a community. So that was like the toughest transition. And I realized on paper I had checked all the boxes. I had this great job still that and I had set it all up. And from the outside, it looks like, wow, Mohit has managed everything he could have wanted, but I wasn't feeling myself.
That is so interesting. And I think it's very interesting how you brought up the point, like, yes, on paper you had everything. Someone looking in would have been like, wow, I'm kind of almost envious because Mohit has he has a great, job. He gets to live in this exotic destination. He gets to travel back and forth and has a nice family. But it's so true that we never know what other people are, first of all, going through. And that's why it's so important to always be kind.
Yeah.
But also just realizing that, we have to find happiness, I think, in the small moments, which is what Anastasia and I are big proponents of, because of the fact that, if we're always we can always be chasing another goal, we can always be chasing something, and it's so important to just take a step back, realize how far we've come, and just appreciate that, because I think otherwise it's so easy to get caught up in everything that life throws in our
100%.
face.
And I think that balance is also so difficult because you can have a great social life with your friends and you can have a great family life, but it just feels like you're not taking enough time for yourself, and you start feeling a bit drained or burned out, or maybe you're doing really great academically and you're doing really great with your sports, but you just feel like your social life is lacking. So balance is difficult and it looks different for everyone. So someone who you might think is thriving is in reality not doing the best. So it's just all about figuring out what's right for us and not worrying too much about appearances.
Exactly. And so on your end, your career, like you've mentioned, has focused a lot and centered a lot around social impact, and specifically in the field of positivity and happiness and wellness. So how does social impact drive our happiness?
Yeah, so the idea of happiness is one that I got quite intrigued by after this period where I felt like, hey, I have everything that I thought I needed, but I don't feel happy. And so I started researching, and I must say that the timing was great because there was a lot coming out in the field of positive psychology. This was about 12 years ago now. And specifically, there was a book I read by Martin Seligman, who's sometimes now called the father of positive psychology. And there's certainly different psychologists who say, oh, this is a good explanation of happiness. But Martin Seligman's explanation I loved, and it really resonated. And I'll share it with you now. It's an act, if it's basically 5 pillars. And each pillar is equally important. There's no kind of hierarchy. And if you make an acronym with each pillar, it spells the word PERMA. So I'll kind of give you what each letter stands for. So the P stands for positive emotions. And that's not one that anyone will be surprised about, but it's sometimes the only thing we think happiness is, right? We think happiness is joy or smiling, but it's much more than just positive emotions. And some of the positive emotions actually surprised me. For example, one positive emotion is curiosity, right? And you may not be smiling when you're curious, but just the idea of asking questions and digging deeper is associated with positive emotions. Another one that I love is this idea of gratitude, right? Is a positive emotions. And you can always, if you're alive, there's always something you can feel grateful for. So I enjoyed kind of connecting with these positive emotions and thinking about which ones can I cultivate more in my life. So that's the P of PERMA. The E of PERMA stands for engagement, and what that means is knowing your strengths and using them. Okay. The R of PERMA means relationships, and it's really making sure that you're cultivating positive relationships and spending time with people who you love, who you value. That in particular for me was extremely hard after that move, and that really explained to me why a lot of what I was feeling was missing, right? I in the past, I hadn't associated positive relationships with kind of our understanding of happiness. Then the M of PERMA stands for meaning, and meaning is the idea that my life has an impact more than just on myself, right? That it impacts others. And then the A of PERMA stands for achievement. And achievement is not necessarily something that's always easy to measure, like, how much money you make or how many Instagram followers you have. It's that you're getting better at the things that matter to you. Okay, so that's PERMA. And when I thought about PERMA, at first I thought about it in relationship to myself, and I realized, oh yeah, this is what's missing, this is what I need to do more of. But then I thought about it also because I was teaching a course on social impact, social innovation, and I realized that the journey of a social innovator actually encompasses all of those pillars in a beautiful way, and I don't need to go through that right now. Later, if you ask me, I can map it. But I did a talk at one point at an Ashoka conference where I kind of did that mapping, and it's a beautiful mapping. And just to give you an example, right, like part of what social innovators do, they're mission driven, so that makes sure that the M is really incorporated in everything they do. Their work is inherently meaningful, which was what was missing for me in my corporate job, right? I was making good money, I was using my strengths, but I didn't feel like I was making a difference in the way that I wanted to make. So the short of it is, it's something I write about in the handbook also, but you can't necessarily, it's not easy to pursue PERMA by itself, because if you pursue happiness, it's like, no, what are you actually doing, and how do you make sure that these different pillars are embedded in what you do? And I think the journey of a social innovator really embeds PERMA.
That is terrific. I really love the whole concept of PERMA, and how, happiness is so much more beyond just feeling good and smiling. Of course, that's a part of it, but like, it's just one pillar out of multiple pillars. And so what I really admire about this concept is how much, we can actively do in the pursuit of it. It's not a feeling that is fleeting, or that, we have to wait around for our birthday or for the holidays to feel happy. It's like, you can engage with others, you can engage with your skills, you can, do something that will help other people build your relationships, motivate and keep your mission moving, and all of that contributes. And so I just think it's a really beautiful way to realize how much control we have over our happiness, as well as, realizing that there's so much other than just a feeling.
No, exactly. And I feel like sometimes we almost like lose track of it, because we're thinking, oh, well, I might not be a super happy person because I'm not constantly laughing, I'm not constantly smiling, I don't always feel incredibly happy and joyful. But that's not all of it. I mean, you should feel fulfilled, you should feel happy sometimes, but happiness and joy is so much more than that, because it's about all your aspects of your life.
And again, like, what I really love is, like you said, like, if you are not fulfilling all those different pillars of what you need to feel happy, then you'll feel it in part of your life. So say you're like even a teen, and you're measuring your achievements by, how you're doing at school, your grades, like, that's great. You should care and put effort and energy into those things. But if you're not focusing on your relationships, or you're not focusing on developing your skills in other facets of life, you're not going to feel as fulfilled.
I think that also, if you're only measuring your achievements as like, oh, well, I didn't do good on a math test, that means I'm a failure. Or if you're, oh, I didn't do very well on this assignment, clearly I'm not doing that well. Or if you do really well, you're like, well, this means that I'm finally worthy. Like, if you measure yourself like that, then, one bad mark or a few bad marks is just going to really, really hurt you, when you need to also focus on achievements that are personal. Like, maybe you realize that you're a good friend. You can measure your achievements by, you can see that you're being there and supporting other people can make them happier, and you have a good bond with others, and kind of tying your achievements into those other things in PERMA.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so, as we've been talking about how social impact really is a major kind of way for us to hit all those different points on PERMA and way for us to boost our happiness, what are your top 3 tips? Because I think sometimes teens can really struggle with knowing, okay, I want to make an impact, I want to help others, but I don't know how, especially as, someone who's not really in the adult world quite yet. So, what would you say? What are your top 3 tips for teens to create social impact?
This is where I think my answer probably has evolved over time, right? So in the past, I might have said, look at your community, look at your school. Your community is, I want to define community. These are like the spaces in which you live as a teenager. So your friends, your family, if you're part of a club, your school, things that you have a direct experience and can influence. And then I would say, look at the gaps, like what are some needs that are not being met? And then I would say, well, what can you start or create to fill that gap, right? And so there's a slight kind of change in my answer right now, because I would still say it's, where can you solve a problem? And so that's being aware of the spaces in which you're interacting in your communities, and finding kind of something that is not working well, something, whether it's from an environmental point of view, maybe people have habits that you feel like, wow, this is contributing to an environmental negative impact, or socially you're noticing that some kids are being bullied or not be integrating. But I, instead of now suggesting that you start and create the solution, I would say look at what's already out there that is working, that may be addressing this issue, and how do you help that organization or that club do a better job through joining, because I think there's, again, this may not have been true 10, 15 years ago, but now I feel there's so many different initiatives that teens are already taking. So rather than creating a new club that's just a little different, that competes against your friend's club, why not join forces and make more of an impact? So that would be my first recommendation, is see what's out there. Once you've identified an issue that you care about, that's impacting you personally or your community, and you feel like, hey, this is what's needed, see what is already there that's trying to address the problem, and how can you join forces. But if there's a gap, if you're like, no, there's nothing, I think I need to start something, then go for it and be like a social entrepreneur, right? Where you start something new. But often you don't need to start something new in order to be a social innovator and make an impact.
I love that so much. I think that it's so amazing that, you know, I love how some people are like, I want to start something new and everything. And I think that's amazing. Like, you should totally do it if there's nothing like that around, but you don't want to be competing with other people.
And the thing is that, like you said, we're stronger
Yeah.
together. And so, like, if you can identify someone or maybe you're
Yeah.
going to make new connections and put some research into it and find an organization near you, or maybe more virtual, distant, online.
Yeah.
Like, you can really be so much stronger as a force together and
For
make a
sure.
bigger change that
And
way.
I know that schools also have a lot of really great clubs to, let kids meet more like-minded individuals. I mean, is a really great place to meet other people who have the same values as you, who want to make an impact as well. So then you can band together and try to even create an even bigger impact, because together, like you said, we are stronger.
Exactly.
And, you are so impressive and so amazing. You have founded the UPeace Center for Executive Education. Tell us more about this organization and your goals.
In Costa Rica, firstly, a little bit of background on Costa Rica. Costa Rica is in Central America, so literally between South America and North America, and it's a country that abolished its army more than 50 years ago. So it's a very forward-looking country in so many ways. It's had a very stable democracy for a long period of time, and the fact that it doesn't have an army, it's been able to take those resources and that budget that usually goes in every country to support an army, and instead it's been able to spend that money on things like healthcare and education. So it's really got very high kind of I would say a developmental levels. Like people live long, healthy lives, especially when you compare to countries in that region of the world. So, in Costa Rica, there's a university that was set up and founded by the United Nations back in 1980. It's called the University for Peace. And it was an initiative by the United Nations where the United Nations decided that, hey, we have so many different universities training people to do all kinds of things, but really one of the biggest needs we have as in the world is a university that trains leaders to understand how to create peace. Because, by the way, back in the 80s, we were also at a time where there was unfortunately where it's not like all's well right now, but there was an imminent threat of a nuclear war, right? It was the Soviet Union was basically a lot of hostility with the United States, and so that was one issue. I think climate change was also beginning to make an appearance. So for many reasons, the United Nations felt like, hey, we need a university dedicated just to educating leaders to understand peace through its many lenses. And so when I got to Costa Rica, it was 2002. So I just finished grad school, and the University for Peace at that point was it was running very limited graduate programs, because frankly, to spend a year in Costa Rica focusing on how to make peace was not something that was attracting a lot of people. And I think the university also had a limited budget to market. So when I got to know about the University for Peace, my thought was, what a great campus. It's a beautiful campus. It's got this amazing mission, which is how do we equip more young people to really think about how to make peace happen in all these different ways. And I thought, I wish there was a way that people could come to the University for Peace for a short course, right, without committing to 1 year. And by the way, the programs that the University for Peace offered were only at the graduate level, right? So my thought was, how do we open this up to just easier ways to study at the University for Peace? So I thought about it, I got to know some people there, and I put together a short proposal, right? Like I pitched them to say, hey, I can start a center for you that's just much more flexible. We're not going to offer graduate degrees, but we're going to offer certificates on topics like leadership, on topics like innovation, and it's all under the umbrella of the University for Peace. But that way we can reach out to business leaders, we can reach out to educators, we work with a number of undergraduate programs. And so that was the idea that I had a long time ago now. And again, I always think about any idea should solve a problem. In my mind, the problem it was solving is that this amazing university in this amazing country, but it was very hard to go and actually study there. So I was like, let's create easier ways. And so, of course, not surprisingly now, there are many, many more people who go through the Center for Executive Education than the university's graduate programs, because those have grown over time, but they still are quite limited. While the Center for Executive Education, we host a bunch of different things, including this summit in March in Happiness, which both of you will be attending, that attracts a couple of hundred people for 3 days. So I'll stop there, but that was the original story and incentive.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that
Yeah,
story. I
it's
think
amazing.
That's very fascinating. And yes, Anastasia and I are very excited and thrilled to be joining and presenting at the summit in this coming March. But that's an incredible backstory, and I really love how, you kind of transformed an already incredible initiative into something that can just reach and impact even more lives.
I think it's so powerful how Costa Rica just decided to get rid of its military to focus more on peace. And I think that's why it's such a great place to put the Peace University, because it shows of this country is really, really involved in making its country itself better rather than focusing so much money on the military.
Exactly. And so you said that, you offer certifications and courses on leadership, and obviously you in of yourself are a leader as well, pitching this concept, writing a book on social entrepreneurship and innovation. What would you say, though, if you were to really narrow it down as a leader, has been one of your greatest learnings?
Yeah, it's maybe a little counterintuitive, but so as a leader, when I set up, so part of what I used to think about leadership is leaders have a vision for something and then they make it happen. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I have this vision for the Center for Executive Education that's going to do high impact work. It's going to open the doors of the university to lots of different audiences, and we're going to do it through a business model where we're not going to be just dependent on somebody supporting us by giving checks. The things that we're going to do are going to bring in income, so if we do them well, we're going to be able to grow, right? That was the idea. And I was very much focused on, I get this, right? I understand business, I understand education, but not surprisingly, soon into this journey. So I was a young dad at the time. I found myself quite exhausted, right? I mean, I was like, there's an expression in Spanish called soyla. Soyla means I'm the person who's ordering the food in the cafeteria, and I'm teaching the courses, and I'm like, and it's just like, it's not a great model for leadership, and it's not sustainable. And so quickly I realized, hey, this is not really about me. I had an idea, I got it off the ground, great, but who can I bring in? Who can I hire? How do I build a team to keep this going? And I'm fortunate I did that because, like I told you, it was fairly unexpected, the fact that my father-in-law was not doing well and we needed to move. But of course, with a team on the ground in Costa Rica, it became much easier for me to be in another country with the center still running. And so part of my kind of insight is leadership is really about developing others who are equally committed to the endeavor, whatever the endeavor may be. In this case, it's running a Center for Executive Education, but there is no way I'd be doing what I'm doing today if I didn't have, an amazing team. And I must say, even though the team, of course, there's rotation over time, right? People come and go and things. But there've been, you'll meet Julia. You already met her. But, she's been there in charge of operations for over a decade now. The first person who came onto the center is still involved. His name is Alonso. He was there for 5 years. So, and then every time we do have a team member, and I love the fact that people come in, contribute in a way that's meaningful to the team and to them, and then move on. But there has been the combination of some level of continuity, but always a team that is carrying things forward. So to me, leadership is really about how do you, share the vision, but really let others feel that ownership that you felt. And otherwise, the show goes down, right? It's no longer a show if it rests on one person's shoulders. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And what I think is so important for everyone to take away from that learning is like, you don't have to come at it alone. You don't need to build something or create impact on your own. Like you mentioned, we're a much stronger force together. So like, invite others to join you, show them what you've learned and help them develop their own set of skills.
Exactly. And I think that it's also really great as teens to think of that. I know, for example, it'd be so much harder to run Small Wins of Happiness if it was just one of us.
Yes.
Because doing it together makes it so much easier, because if one of us, has a test coming up, the other can help us out. It's just so hard to run everything on your own and to be the only person that it's all dependent on, because then it's also very stressful. Like, if I'm not able to finish this, then like I don't know, like it's gonna pile up. It can get so overwhelming. So having those people that you can depend on, those people that you trust and you know are gonna do a good job, and then you can divide and conquer, I think is so important.
Totally, and I absolutely agree with what Nancy just said. In any sense of life, like whether it's, practicing for a sport or at a club or like volunteering for an organization or a cause or starting your own initiative, it's always so great to have people that you can hold on to and, go on a journey on together. Everyone has different skills. Everyone brings something different to the table. Everyone can lift themselves up. And if you want to be in a position of leadership and you want to like really contribute to the overall dynamic of the team, it's really great to recognize every person for their own value and strengths.
100%. And you are such an expert in leadership. I mean, you like started this whole program about it. What is one of the top skills that leaders today should have?
There are a few that come to mind, but I would prioritize, so a little bit building on what I said around, to me, leadership is really sharing the vision with others. Obviously, there's stuff that needs to get done, right? So I also think of leaders help create a team that can get stuff done or execute on strategy, sometimes what we call it. But I think the biggest one for me would be leaders as coaches. So leaders who are able to develop others on the team, and so they're not starting off thinking, hey, I'm the smartest person in the room. They might be good at one aspect of the business, but they're ideally hiring extremely smart people, or a combination of, when I say smart, I mean like good at doing things in a particular area, right? But I think the ability to develop others through and when I say coaching, it to me that involves like listening really well, asking great questions in a way that people are like, I think I get it. I found the solution, not like somebody told me what to do. And then again, that creates a sense of this is mine. Like I wasn't told what to do. Somebody asked me a few questions and I kind of came up with this. And so leaders who coach their team members and, other people on their teams so that they feel totally invested. They feel like they're setting direction. They're not being told what to do. So it reaches higher levels of commitment. Now, it might seem like an obvious thing. Oh, that's not complicated. But it is complicated to coach, especially if you know the answer. Because if somebody comes to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, what's the right price point or what's the right marketing strategy? Guess what? I always have an opinion, right? Like I'm not like, oh, I have no clue. I have a clue. But it's like holding myself back from telling them what I think they should do and really listening to what they're telling me and asking the right questions. And so I'm always working on that. I'm my first degree or my undergrad degree was in industrial engineering, and that's like a problem-solving mindset. Like engineers solve problems, and that instinct, unfortunately, is not the best way to lead. Is like solve other people's problems, because then everything becomes a problem and you're a problem solver and your organization is a problem to be solved. No, versus like how do I unlock people's potential. So any case, sorry I went long on that, but I do think about that a lot.
I really appreciate that, and I know I think it was a great answer, because I agree, like it's so important to get people to feel like they own something, and everyone has, like I said, something to contribute. And so whenever you're working in a group dynamic, even if you're like just a part of a team, like even if you're not, like say you're on the sports team, say you're on the basketball team at school, you might not be the coach or even like the captain, but just being able to, see what everyone's good at and helping people if they are like to develop their skills rather than just saying, hey, if you can't take that shot, I'll take it. And if you can't defend that player, I can defend them too. Don't even worry about it. Like helping people in whatever sense it is so important to our relationships, important to our happiness, and to their happiness.
Also important to realize is that I know a lot of us, especially as teens, we want to be perfect, like in a sport. We want to be like the best at all the positions. So whenever we play it, we're just amazing at it. And then, but the problem is that if you become perfect at all the positions on the team, if you can do all of the work perfectly, then you're going to spread yourself out really thin and you're not going to be able to excel at it. So you're good at it, but someone else who focuses more of their energy on it will be better than you.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the end, it's better to be really, really focused on, your one thing that you're good at, your strength, and lean into that and become an expert at that. And then afterwards, you can lean on your other teammates and say, hey, I'm going to need a little bit of help on this, because that that's what they're good at.
Exactly. We can just find teammates anywhere in life, like whether it's actually on a team or just like friends or, our group or anything like that. And so being a leader, being an entrepreneur, being a teenager, just honestly, in any area of life, there's a lot of pressures and stressors. Even if you're not leading an executive center or captain of a team, many teens can relate to these feelings when it comes to sports, admissions, school, etc. And so what would you say is your top piece of advice for keeping a relatively positive mindset throughout stressful times?
Yeah, that's a tough one for many reasons. So I think one is I know people are wired differently, right? So, but I'll tell you what, I have found myself, even at this stage in life, where I feel like, what am I stressing about? Like, who am I trying to prove what to? But I am often feeling like, hey, I'm feeling stress. It's not rational, right? So some things that I do now that really help me is I realize that I can't easily talk myself out of a situation where I'm stressed. So for me, something that's very effective and easy, partly because I live in a warm climate, I can always go out for a walk very easily. I find when I get into my body, it really helps, right? Connecting with the outdoors, it reminds me, wow, there's something else that's bigger than the one thing I'm stressing about. So if I move my body and then think about the issue, it changes. I do feel like the idea of talking through it with somebody, sharing the issue really helps me. And so sometimes in my most stressful times, I've actually gotten closer to people. Sometimes it's a friend who I'm already close to. Maybe I talk to part of it is some of my best friends live in other countries, so I talk to them on weekends, but when something is coming up, maybe I'm talking to them 2 or 3 times a week just during that period. So that social support I lean on. But frankly, I have a couple of teenage daughters myself, and when they are stressed about something, to me, some of the things they're stressing about feel like, oh, it's nothing, but I know that for them it means a lot and they're agitated. And so if I sometimes tell them, hey, why don't you go for a walk and see if it helps, they don't do that, right? It's not really their thing. So I do want to recognize that it's different for different people, but I do feel like our own ability to understand, hey, what do I need to manage stress and anxiety is an important thing. The last thing I'll say is there are certain breathing techniques that frankly are super efficient because they've been researched. Marines use them in combat situations. Olympic athletes use them. One is called box breathing. You can research it, but it's like deep breathing, except let's say you inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you hold for almost 4 seconds. You exhale for 4 seconds, then you hold for 4 seconds again. And that's one breath. And if you do that 4 or 5 times, it physiologically calms you down, reduces anxiety. And again, it's not necessarily getting to the core of what might be causing anxiety, but once your body is in that calm state, it becomes easier to problem solve, right? So I like I said, I'm still very much dealing with different things that come up.
The thing about, I think, life in general is, like, we need these tools because no matter, like, I think as a teenager, like, once I graduate high school and I know which, like, school I'm going to be admitted into, like, then I won't stress anymore. But then you get there and, there's a whole new set of stress. And then you graduate university or you graduate post-secondary and there's a whole new set of stressors. And no matter
there's always
what,
going to be stress.
Yeah, as you go through life, different phases, different stresses. And that's just something that I think we all need to work upon is like having those handholds, having those skills. And so what I really appreciate that you said is, you know, this box breathing, I love that idea. I remember when I was like in the 7th grade, my teacher told us all about it, and I use it like before a test or an exam because it's stressful. It's like a lot of pressure coming down to this moment. And so what I like to do is like, it's very quick, very not noticeable.
Exactly.
And it's just a great way to kind of reset and also like think clearer, because I'm pretty sure I've read like breathing, you know, helps get more oxygen into your brain, helps you breathe and focus and clear your brain.
Yeah. So. And I also love how you talked about communication. I feel like oftentimes by just sharing what we're going through, like you said, it helps build that better bond with other people. And then like you said earlier, it also, that relationship helps us feel happier. So in the long run, if you're slowly building those relationships, even when you're stressed, it also leads to better happiness in the long term. So it's kind of like finding the good out of the stress. Do you have a piece of advice that you would give your teenage self? I know you have two teenage daughters, but if you could turn the clock back, what would you tell yourself?
You know, I think I used to worry about these things that I now know actually didn't matter at all, right? And so maybe I would just tell myself, hey, enjoy the ride ahead. It's going to be bumpy. There's going to be stuff that you're going to be stressed out about, but just know that none of the stuff that you think about and stress about actually matters. And just knowing that might help me when I was like, but again, I wouldn't want to, you know, I think part of the journey of life is also having these stresses, caring about them, getting through them, and that develops resilience, right? So then you can remind yourself, oh yeah, I remember that time I got a C and I was not used to getting a C, and how did I cope with it, and everything worked out fine. Or the time when, you know, I had this breakup and it felt like, you know, oh, my world was ending, but obviously it was part of what needed to happen for, you know, so yeah, I think I wouldn't want my life to have not had some of these ups and downs, but also just knowing at the back of the mind that it doesn't really matter would have maybe eased it.
I think that's amazing, you know, having that kind of mindset that like, it's okay, what's gonna come at me is not going to kill me. I can get through this, even if it's hard, but that in the long run, it doesn't really matter the specific details, because what's meant to happen will happen.
Exactly. And so what do you do every day that brings you a small bit of happiness?
I definitely, one is I do get movement every day, whatever that looks like. So actually I went for a quick run before this podcast and so that's why I was thirsty. I was like, oh, I need to get some water, and I was like sweating a little bit still, but yeah, I try to get movement. It just the way I'm wired, I almost need it. It definitely relaxes me. I do the 3 gratitudes. I think you're ideally supposed to write them down. There's something about journaling, but I end up, because I travel a lot and lose my journal, I end up doing it on my phone. So I have a memo that's pinned, and that's the 3 things I'm grateful for. I think those 2 things, and then one thing and maybe this is a little bit cultural, but there's a lot of emphasis. I'm from Bengal in India, and food is a big deal. And so at least one of my meals, I will just like single task. Like I will not be watching TV or on my phone. I'll just enjoy the food, and in a way that it just, yeah, that's like the emotion, the pleasure emotion, but it makes me happy, and I'm like, my brain is not trying to do something else. So those are probably 3 things that if 2 of those 3 will happen on a daily basis. Yeah.
That's terrific. I really love what you said about food, because I'm the same way. And whenever I'm eating my food, whenever I'm eating dinner, like whether it's if I'm with family members, I love to be in the moment and like have conversation. And if I'm by myself, maybe having like a snack or whatever it might be, I really love to just put my phone away for a moment and just like enjoy the flavors and enjoy the experience of having a nice tasty snack or meal, because I think that we can get so much joy and happiness from like something so simple.
Exactly. And you know, you have to eat, so you might as well make the most of it.
Exactly. And so I love that, and I love how, you know, you've adapted your daily happiness habits to your lifestyle. Like it's okay that you can't journal because maybe you're on the go lifestyle, but you still have your daily gratitudes. Exactly.
So I know we talked about this a bit earlier, but do you have a motivational quote that you love and remember? And if so, why?
Yeah, so this one, it's not particularly, what shall I say, there's certainly other quotes that I've encountered in my life that I'm like, oh wow, that's profound. But one that came up a long time ago, and I don't know who said it, it was like, you miss every shot you don't take, right? And think about it, shot as in everything, like, shooting a basketball or trying something, right? You miss everything. Like if I tell myself, oh, I'm not going to get it, or it's not going to work out, then it's not going to happen, right? If I don't take the shot. And so I think for me, that is a really great reminder. And it's interesting, some of the things that I've tried, and I'm like, that is such a long shot, but I'm going to try it. It's so surprising how many other people, I think, have told themselves, yeah, it's not going to happen for me. So they take themselves out of the game. And then I've been surprised many times. And part of it is, it's also now a little bit like, the combination of opening doors that didn't necessarily feel they would easily open, or doing something adventurous that if you think too hard, it's like, no, I'm not going to do this. Like, why would I visit a country where I don't speak the language? It's going to be overwhelming. So I think I've extended that idea to many things, but it's opened the world for me. This idea is, hey, if I don't try it, it's not going to happen. And if I try it, I'm not going to jump out of the plane without a parachute, right? It's not like I'm going to take on a crazy risk, but I am going to try things that seem unreasonable. And one of my motivations, and he's been in my life ever since I was born. I have a older brother, and I was I've spent a lot of time with him over the years. But at one point, I think he was in his mid-20s, he left his job, he had moved to London, and he was like, just in this new country. It was the year 2000, and he was hearing music that he didn't know what it was, and he and a friend was like, wouldn't it be cool, the cell phones had just come out, wouldn't it be cool if we came up with something that could identify music? And they ended up starting this company. I ended up, because I was a school teacher at the time, I ended up being their first intern, but they called it Shazam. They didn't even know if the name made sense, but it ended up becoming like this huge app that recognizes music and things. So I was like, it definitely also, inspired me. Like, yeah, it felt like such an impossible thing to create, and they did it. And so, in my mind, like, why wouldn't one take a shot at something? I think the odds of them being successful were like, 1% or something. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's so amazing. Like, you just need to try. You just need to shoot your shot, throw the ball. You don't know where it's gonna land. Right. And I love how you also said that, like, half the people who be interested in doing it or who be qualified to do something like that, they just kind of like psych themselves out. Like, they think, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do it. So then half your competition is gone already. So the chances of you being able to do it are so much higher. So the best thing you can do is just try your best. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay, but it's just the fact that you tried. Is that what matters?
That is incredible, and I love the story about your brother.
That's actually insane.
So cool. And so, as like a last question, do you have anything exciting coming up that you would like to share with us and our listeners today?
Yeah, so, in a way I kind of mentioned it briefly, but so in Costa Rica at the University for Peace, we're hosting a 3-day happiness summit. And it's 7th to 9th March, and I know that both of you will be there, which is amazing. I don't know how you found out about it, but most people never hear about it. And I think it's life-changing on our side as a team, where we're really working hard at it right now. I just got the draft agenda. We just secured a keynote speaker from Bhutan, which is a country that measures happiness as an indicator of, they don't measure gross national product. They measure basically the happiness levels of people, and he'll be talking about that. So I'm working on it, and we always have innovative formats. So that's super exciting.
What I am obviously very excited about is the summit. We're very, very excited. Amazing. And so where can anyone go if they want to keep up and learn more?
Yeah, so one place where we have all the information around, the programs we do in Costa Rica, which are both in Costa Rica and online, the summit and all, is our website. And I think the fastest way to get there would be just to Google UPeace Center for Executive Education. And then, yeah, if people want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I often post about these things coming up. If you put in my first name, which is Mohit, Mohit, and last name is Mukherjee, Mukherjee on LinkedIn, I come up. Feel free to connect or follow me, and yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mohit. We'll have those linked in the show notes as well for quick access.
Yeah.
And Anastasia and I just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
This is amazing.
Your insights are so incredible, and we're just so excited to share all this with our audience, and we've both taken away a lot from today also.
Hey, so fun to do this. I love the energy throughout the process. So appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness.
And thank you so much to Mohit for joining us for today's episode. He is so inspiring, and I really loved all of the different insights he shared with us. They're very profound. Anastasia, what was your biggest takeaway?
I think that you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take is so important to know, because like his brother, if he hadn't started that amazing company, I love Shazam. It's so profound that if you just don't take this small opportunity, you can miss out on so much, and you don't want to be like that. So just, if you feel drawn to something, try it. What about you, Mercedes?
Totally. And one of my biggest takeaways from today is the fact that no matter how much success you have to make sure that you have a balanced life, because like Mohit experienced, he had everything on paper, the whole dream package, but realistically he was not experiencing that balance that is so essential to our happiness. And so this is kind of our little sign to make sure your life is balanced, and that looks different for everyone. So kind of experiment and see what brings you the most happiness, and realize that there's got to be some give and take and ebbs and flows.
Exactly. If you enjoyed this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, please leave us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening. It really helps us out, and we really appreciate it.
Also, make sure to join our happiness family. That way you'll never miss another episode. And we'd also love to have you. It's totally free. You can join the family by following Hack Your Happiness on whichever podcast listening platform you're on now. See you next time!